The moment we hear the term Middle Ages, we immediately envision grand banquets, wild boars roasting on a spit, wine overflowing from golden chalices, and jesters performing by the hearth. Yet, beneath this romantic image lies a far more mysterious and wondrous world of tastes, habits, and taboos. Today we step inside the medieval kitchen to discover what knights and peasants really ate, the bizarre flavor combinations that were once delicacies, and why food was more than just a necessity. It was a true symbol of life itself. But the most surprising part is what lay hidden behind the culinary habits of different social classes. This is what we reveal next. Peasant life. The power of pottage. Medieval food reflects life, so we start with those who are almost all of Europe's population, with simple peasants. Their daily diet was austere yet shaped by centuries of necessity. Food had to not only provide sustenance but also be able to keep for a long time. In the morning, the peasants started the day with a piece of dark bread and a mug of warm beer or diluted ale. At noon, a thick vegetable and grain stew. And the evening meant more porridge or bread, sometimes with cheese or onion added. The main food was porridge from barley, wheat or oats, nutritious but plain. The centerpiece was pottage, a thick, slow-simmered stew made from whatever could be scavenged from the garden: cabbage, beans, turnip, onion. Meat was a luxury, eaten only on holidays when animals were killed or small game was caught. Sometimes meat was replaced by fish or dried mushrooms. To keep the food from being completely bland, peasants added wild herbs, nettle, plantain, sorrel, dill. This did more than add flavor, it was vital for helping them survive during famine. Even bread back then was special, heavy, dense, and mixed with coarse bran or pea flour. Peasants ate their meals from wooden or clay bowls because bread was far too precious to ever be wasted as a mere serving vessel. The nobility, however, made use of what were known as trenchers, thick slices of stale bread which served as edible plates. After the first use, these were often given to the poor or dogs, making food a form of charity. Sometimes they could afford something sweet, honey if the bees had survived the winter well, or some forest-gathered berries or fruit. But overall, the peasant's diet was harsh, modest, and dictated by the rhythm of nature. Every piece of bread resulted from grueling hard labor and was a blessing for which one truly had to thank fate. We should also remember the fasts. About half the days of the year were fast days, when eating meat, eggs, and dairy products was forbidden. In those specific times, the diet shifted greatly, giving way to fish, fresh vegetables, and almond milk. Yet peasant meals stayed meager. But within noble halls, a vastly different world unfolded. Feasts of power. Gastronomy for the elite. Noble life was like an endless stage play where the dining table itself played the leading role. For the aristocracy, food wasn't just fuel, it was a language of power, a display of immense wealth, and a tactical social tool. The more exotic, costly, and complex the dish, the higher the host's status. The feast began long before the first course was served. In spacious halls under the castle vaults, hundreds of candles were lit, the walls decorated with coats of arms, and tempting smells of roasted meat and spices came from the kitchen. Guests were seated by rank, as even their specific spot at the table meant a great deal. Musicians played lutes, a jester was sent to incite merriment, and cooks prepared legendary dishes. Roasted peacocks with full feathers appeared, symbolizing wealth and the exotic. The presentation was theatrical. The bird could be covered in a golden glaze, or even be painstakingly reshaped to appear as if still alive. Fish was baked in almond sauce, pies with raisins, fig honey were served, desserts with spices and almonds. Everything shone, smelled good, and amazed the guests. Using expensive spices was a special sign of chic: pepper, cinnamon, nutmeg, cloves, ginger. These spices arrived from distant lands and cost a fortune. A bag of pepper could cost as much as a cow. They were added not only for flavor, they emphasized the host's status and symbolized power over overseas lands and trade routes. Refrigerators did not exist. Spices were a king's ransom. The idea that they were used to mask spoiled meat is a pure myth. Spices were so expensive that anyone who could afford pepper or saffron could surely afford the very best fresh meat too. Spices played a different role here. They stressed the host's wealth and status. For a medieval noble, it was important to impress guests with extravagance, not just feed them, because political alliances, marriages, and deals were decided at the table. In this light, A lavish feast was far more than a celebration, but a grand stage where high society drama unfolded daily. Yet, these royal feasts were truly just the tip of the iceberg. The real gastronomic revolution was happening beyond the castle walls, on the narrow, noisy streets of medieval cities. Medieval fast food, the original street food. Medieval cities were in constant motion. Markets, traders, craftsmen, travelers, everyone was in a hurry, and few people had the extra time to cook at home. Thus, cities saw the birth of street food, the ancestors of modern fast food. On the narrow cobblestone streets, from early morning, the cries of vendors could be heard, the smell of fried fish mixed with the aroma of freshly baked bread, and market noise created a unique vibe. Townsfolk bought food right on the street. Hot meat or onion pies, flatbreads with cheese, fried fish, pancakes, soups, and thick stews. Everything was fast and filling, though street food often caused suspicion. These stalls were often food for the poor or those without an oven. People ate on the go, right in the square or near the stalls, because every hour in the city was worth its weight in gold. Sometimes you could buy ready meat or stewed vegetables on the street. And local bread kiosks sold fresh rolls, for which people formed actual long queues. Small taverns existed where travelers and citizens could eat as well as at home. Hot meals, boiled meats, and hearty pottages were offered there, and sometimes their own brewed ale. In some taverns, service was so fast that they could safely be called the first medieval food courts. At night, they turned into loud social hubs for discussing news, trade deals, and even politics. Street food became an absolutely integral part of city life. It brought all classes together. A poor man could eat next to a merchant, a craftsman next to a traveler, and the aroma of pies beckoned everyone passing by. So, fast food was not a 20th century invention. It arose where people first decided that time was often more valuable than a meal. But what did all these people drink, from peasants to kings, when water could become a deadly danger? What did they drink? It wasn't just wine. Medieval beverages truly deserve a separate and detailed discussion. Clean water was highly valued, and where there was a reliable spring or well, it was drunk without fear. But city water was often suspect. Therefore, weak beer became the main beverage of daily life. It was brewed everywhere, from monasteries to farmsteads. It was a thick, grainy beer with low alcohol content which both adults and children drank to quench their thirst. It essentially functioned as both drink and food, a source of calories and energy. A kind of liquid bread, familiar and accessible to everyone. In northern regions where grapes did not grow, beer and cider became the daily norm. But in the south, especially in France, Italy, and Spain, the main drink was wine. It varied in quality and purpose. Cheap for daily needs. Thick and tart for the feasts of the nobility. For aristocrats, wine was ritualistic. It was diluted with water, honey, spices, herbs, or even flowers were added, turning the drink into a true elixir of refinement. There were also special drinks: mead, herbal tinctures, fruit wines. Mead was seen as more than just a treat. It was a gift from the gods. As such, these honey-based elixirs were reserved for the most special occasions, at weddings, fairs, and harvest parties. In monasteries, where recipes were carefully preserved, monks brewed aromatic liqueurs and herbal infusions, believing they strengthened the body and spirit. Interestingly, drinking in the Middle Ages served not only to quench thirst, but also a sanitary function. Light alcohol killed bad bacteria, and hot brews and infusions were considered healing, so a foaming mug of beer or a glass of wine was far more than just pleasure, but an element of survival. In an age when water could be an enemy, drinks were salvation and part of the culture uniting everyone from peasants to kings. But the most surprising thing is far from beer or wine. In the Middle Ages, there were drinks that almost no one knows about today. Strange, strong, medicinal, and even mystical. What did people drink when they wanted to warm up, invigorate themselves, or glimpse beyond ordinary reality? The four humors: eating for your health. In the Middle Ages, food and medicine were closely intertwined. The boundaries between them barely existed. People believed food could heal or harm, depending on how it balanced the body's internal humors: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. The basis of these ideas, the theory of the four bodily fluids: blood, phlegm, yellow, and black bile. Each of these corresponded to a specific temperament and its quality, e being hot or cold and either moist or dry. It was thought that health was the harmony of these elements, and sickness, their disruption. So food was chosen like medicine. If a person was too cold, they were advised to eat warming dishes, meat with ginger, cloves, and pepper. For those suffering from heat, cooling products were prescribed: fruits, vinegar, greens. Even the seasons dictated the diet. In winter, fatty and spicy foods to help maintain warmth. In summer, sour and light to cool the blood. So cooking became a kind of therapy and the table an apothecary. Medieval doctors, relying on the teachings of ancient philosophers like Galen and Hippocrates, might prescribe a patient not a tincture, but for example, chicken broth with saffron to restore strength, or even warm wine with herbs specifically to improve digestion. In monasteries, monks created entire healing kitchens. They brewed infusions, salves, and remedies there, but it all happened on the same stoves used for regular food. Thus, in the Middle Ages, a meal was not just eating, but a ritual of caring for body and soul. Food was seen as part of the world's harmony because people of that time thought health started not at the pharmacy, but at the dinner table. But the most surprising thing is that many medieval healing dishes seem strange and sometimes scary to us. However, for people then, they were part of the strict logic of the world's order. Which recipes were seen as almost magical? And why have some actually survived almost unchanged to this day? Debunking the biggest food myths. Medieval cooking is covered in many myths, so strong that they have long been rooted in popular culture. It often seems like medieval people ate absolutely anything, knowing no hygiene, taste, or basic rules. But reality is much more interesting. One of the most widespread myths is that all of the food back then was dirty or even rotten. In reality, people knew perfectly well how to store food. They salted, smoked, dried. The skill of preserving food was vital, and many techniques used by housewives then were as good as modern ones. Winter supplies were a point of honor. Cellars held many barrels of salted fish, dried meat, vegetables, and fruit that lasted for many months. Another misconception is that chaos reigned at the table. In fact, the nobility followed very strict rules for social behavior. It was forbidden to lick a knife, speak with a full mouth, or pick one's teeth. Those who broke the rules could even be thrown out. Table manners were so incredibly strict that entire etiquette books existed, explaining exactly how to hold a spoon, when to raise the cup, and even how to properly share bread with your neighbor. The feast was more than a meal, it was a social ritual, and everyone at the table showcased their upbringing, status, and respect for the host. Therefore, the notion that medieval people ate haphazardly is yet another myth born from modern perceptions of the past. But while some myths are easily debunked, others hide far deeper and darker secrets. Why did certain ideas about medieval food emerge even though they flatly contradict the facts? And what exactly makes reality even more amazing than any legend? The legacy of the medieval kitchen. Medieval cuisine is a window into the past, through which we can see not only the tastes and recipes of a bygone era, but also human nature itself. And it speaks of an enduring struggle to survive in truly harsh conditions, the desire for celebration even in poverty, the aspiration to show greatness through food and rituals. In every piece of bread, in every spice, in every custom, we discover stories of the labor, faith, fears, and joys of people who lived centuries ago. We see how food served as fuel, medicine, a symbol of power, and part of culture, how everyday peasant simplicity existed alongside grand noble luxury, how city streets became the first places where fast food appeared, how drinks fought against sickness and spices became a currency just like gold. And most importantly, we understand that food has always been much more than just food. It is the era's language, full of kitchen aromas, hearth sounds, and clinking metal cups. It preserved the spirit of the time better than chronicles. If you enjoyed this journey into the world of medieval cuisine, subscribe to the channel. Next will be tastier, more interesting, and unexpected.